At $200, a Super Nintendo setup costs twice as much as the old system. For the money, the company promises better pictures, sound, and adventure. Now you're playing with power, superpower. You're the king, I tell you! The king!
Only for Super NES.
Only on Super NES.
You're listening to the SNES podcast with your host, Soulblazer.
Hello, everybody. This is the Super NES podcast, episode number 253. I'm Greg, joined always by Joe.
Hello.
And today we're covering a game that I have some nostalgia for. But it's a very interesting, definitely a very unique game in many ways. Early Super NES game. We're looking at the 3D perspective role-playing game Drakkhen for the Super NES. A port of the Super NES from its original computer ports, which we're talking to here like in a little bit. So. I remember Joe say that he confirmed he never had played this game, but
yeah, nope.
I think did you say that you've experienced with the sequel perhaps?
No, I have not.
Okay, all right. Because there is a sequel. We'll talk about that here, but later on. But Drakkhen is a very interesting game. The history of this is kind of complicated, so I'll try to summarize this as best I can because there's actually like a lot of history here as far as this game goes. But Drakkhen was originally created by the computer company Infogrames, who's now known by Atari. Which was a big computer developer in the 80s and 90s, primarily in Europe, but a lot of their games did come over here to the west as well too. So, in 1989, the high end, the new kids on the block, as far as the most powerful computers that were available on the market at that point, was the Atari ST and the Amiga, which were roughly equivalent of one another as far as their processing power and graphical chips and whatever. These were you're not that much older. Younger than me, Joe. You may remember the Amiga commercials. They were beautiful systems at the time period, but they're like really nice graphics. But they were very good workstations too. A lot of companies also use them for like word processing and music and that kind of stuff as well too. So they were very powerful systems like for day and age, and also had the price to go along with it, which is why I stuck with my C64 because. But for those people who could play games on the systems, they were very nice games for sure. CinemaWare certainly was the biggest developer for games on the Amiga. Defenders of the Crown, and a bunch of other games of theirs were Wings and then some other stuff were really showed off what Amiga could do. So Infogrames decided to make a role playing game that could really utilize the graphical and processing abilities of these systems to their max. So Drakkhen was what they came up with, and this is not really. This is not the, so like this kind of game falls kind of like a third kind of a gray zone as far as role playing games go. That was a gray zone nowadays we definitely have our own subject area for it, but because it's not a JRPG and it's not it also was not a traditional Western role-playing computer game as we knew them at the time, a la Wizardly, a la Might and Magic, that kind of stuff. This was a full 3D perspective game. We actually could walk around the world in full 3D, which was unheard of at the time period. So basically the Amiga, the Atari had the processing power to be able to do this, so they took advantage of that. The whole game wasn't in 3D. They did do. When you got into battle, your party members would walk out on the screens. You could see them actually running around and fighting the monsters and whatnot. That was done at 2.5D perspective. And the castles, which the game often erroneously calls dungeons for some reason, but they are castles. Also switched to a side perspective as well too, to cut down the processing power required because trying to do. It really wasn't until later computers would be more processing power when you had the likes of Morrowind and whatnot. We really started getting full 3D games that you could do 3D in both the outer world and the dungeons as well. So, and nowadays Drakkhen would be kind of be considered a Western role-playing game because the genres evolved toward that full 3D on perspective, Skyrim and Fallout and whatnot. But back then, this was a very new kind of game. That's why I said it kind of fell into that third gray area that didn't really have anything that couldn't really compare itself to anything that had been released up to that time period. So, the game originally came out in France only, and was a very very popular game. It was a success because, like I said, it was very groundbreaking and evolutionary at which time period. So they wanted to capitalize on that. So Infogrames licensed out the game to other companies. Somebody did. I actually could not find out who this was, but somebody did ports of the game for Japanese computers, the PC-98, the FM Towns Marty, and the Sharp X68000. And then Data East got the rights to port the game to DOS, and that version of the game came out here in North America in 1990. So, and then somebody decided that the game might make a very good early Super NES game because the Super NES would have their processing power to be able to handle the game. So the game was licensed out to Chemco Sika, who's now just Chemco at this time period, who already had some track record about porting games from computers to consoles. They did the whole Mac Adventure games, Shadowgate, Deja Vu, and Innovative for the NES, and they also did Lagoon, which you covered previously on this podcast, for the Super NES as well too. So they took the game and licensed it and changed the game around and released it for the Super NES. And because it was a very early Super NES game, it came out in December 1991 in North America. It wasn't a launch title, but it was very shortly after launch title. And because of that reason, Drakkhen took advantage of that fact there wasn't really any games in the market by advertising heavily in magazines and whatnot. So this game was highly promoted and highly pumped up. Nintendo Power, Video Game Magazine, a lot of other places talking about the game as well too. So, and because of all of that, when the game came out, partly because of the hype and partly because of the fact that there wasn't very many games available in the system at this time period, it also sold very, very well for the console. So, a lot of the game had to be changed to make it work on the Super NES. Some of it for the better, some of it for the worst. So, it kind of gave you a very, really quick broad strokes thing about the game. First of all, title screen, surprisingly enough, is largely the same. Did you notice anything impressive about that title screen, Joe?
I mean, I thought it was very well detailed, and I actually like the fact that the dragon kind of basically breathes and etches the name into the tombstone. I thought that was pretty cool. But
yes.
Yeah, other than that, I mean, when I powered it up, it felt like I was playing an old school PC game, not a Super Nintendo game. Yeah,
it definitely has that PC game feel to it too. But yeah, so yeah, everybody pay attention to the dragon. Nobody knows the fact that the altar was covered with blood. So Nintendo obviously missed that as well too, because they would have censored that if I hadn't seen that. So yeah, so everybody pays attention to the dragon. Nobody saw the blood. So so yeah, that title screen is pretty much straight over the original computer version. But one change they made was the original computer version had on the top left all the character icons. That got moved to the bottom of the screen with the Super NES version, the Super NES version of the game. So some of the changes, like I said, some of the changes that they made were for the better. Some of the worst. The original game had great sound effects, which allows how sound effects do carry over to this version of the game. Sound effects sound very good from the early Super NES games. So. There's an old man who randomly shows up every now and then to give you hints and advice. He talks in a very Charlie Brown mumbling way to you, which is very endearing. So, but there really wasn't any music or very little music in the computer version of the game. Super NES version of the game adds full music all throughout the game. There was another sound effect that was censored out by Nintendo. The original version of the game had a monster called the Love Monster, which is like a huge shadow, woman-like shaped creature. It's still present in the game, But in the computer version of the game, she repeatedly shouted, "I love you," in a chorus of demonic voices. So that had to be changed, obviously, for the Super NES port of the game, because even the Super NES could do voices, there was no way Nintendo was going to allow that. So that had to be changed. The interface was obviously changed to use the controller as opposed to the mouse. It's a little bit more clunky moving around the cursor icons using a controller, but you get the hang of it. The biggest issue is that you don't have the fine-tuned control in moving your party around the map and the dungeons that the mouse allowed. So the controllers are kind of a bit mushy as far as like trying to be sloppy with the navigating around. It's hard to get pinpoint precision movement. That's why the ability to be able to change one person to only move one person at a time in the dungeon is very handy because because that clunky style. The graphics are the same beautiful updated version that the DOS version of the game had, so no problem there. The story was the most radical change. The story was, for some reason, possibly because there's no censorship, the story was completely redone between the computer version and the Super NES version of the game. The broad strokes of the story are still the same in both versions of the game. Long ago, there are these dragons, half dragons, the half dragons have humans. Some are good, some are evil. The gods the gods are giving humans a chance to be able to save themselves, like they're on an isle, the Drakkhen Isle. Those broad strokes are all the same. However, the story got completely rewritten for the Super NES. Which is a shame because the original version of the game, of the computer version, had some input into development. And part of the story for the original version of the game actually was done by Gary Gygax of like D&D fame. And there also was a mini book included with the game as well, written by him, which included additional background details and whatever on the story. The computer version of the story has you being you shipwreck on Drakkhen. And you're attacked for some unknown reason. If you find out that to be able to lift the curse on humanity and get off this island, you need to get the 9 gem tears and summon the dragon god. The Super NES version of the game, like I said, still roughly follows that to a degree. It simplifies things to being like the 4 dragon gods, son and daughter. Some of them are good, some of them are evil. You just have to get the 9 tears from them. From them. However, the overall tone of the story is darker. The gods definitely punish humans for killing all the dragons in the past, and this is like a last chance for humanity to redeem itself. So, very different takes. There is a good story here in this game. A lot of it's told in a very rough, broken, abstract way, and you kind of have to go out of your way to look for clues in story. If you just do the main plot basically from beginning to end, you're going to miss a lot of it. But the story is here and it's decent, and I think at least decent enough by the time period, like what it was. So, some other like rough changes. Text was made bigger, easier to read. There's less NPCs to talk to. A mini map was added. Believe it or not, Joe, the original version of the game did not have any mapping. Did not have any mapping at all. So
wow. Okay.
So
I guess I'm kind of grateful now for what they did include.
They also added in a brief tutorial and showed the game up if you wanted, which is very nice. Again, most games this time period did not do that. So having that brief tutorial to tell you briefly what each icon does and whatnot is definitely nice. So combat is done in an abstract way. You are able to decide. You obviously are able to equip your party beforehand. You basically have like two fighter types and two magic to use types. You can change in battle, switching between like the weapon and magic. But for the most part, magic battle just pretty much happens like its own. So. which is again similar to the computer version of the game. The computer version of the game allowed a little bit more control than the Super NES Autopilot does, but it's not that much of a difference. So, but anyway, that's the game in rough and broad strokes as far as this. I know you do enjoy 3D open world games, Joe. Like, I know you have played like the Elder Scrolls, the Fallouts, whatever. Yeah. So keep. I wasn't sure what you would like think about this game, which is why I was trying not to say too much about it beforehand, because there are aspects of this game that I'm sure you like. I'm sure that I'm sure there's aspects of the game that you did not. So I'm kind of so. Like I said, I beat this game when it first came out because I'm like there wasn't a lot, the same reason I mentioned earlier. There wasn't a lot of Super NES games out of the time period, and this game was very heavily promoted. Right. So I did play and beat it, and it's not a very long game. You know what you're doing. The Let's Plays online are about 4 hours long, so it's not a particularly like long game. You are able to save anywhere you want to save. Also, there's 2 save spots for that, so being able to save anywhere you want to, including including dungeons, that's a nice touch. But anyway, so all right. So now that I've like explained the history, explained the basic gameplay and rough strokes. Let's hear what you thought about it, and you if you were able to overcome this 1990-ish difficulty curve, the curve and roughness to get into it.
Yeah, and I just want to add, like, to the broad strokes of the story, like, I think you left one of the most important things out, which is your main objective in this game. Yes, you're collecting the 8 gems, but it's like your party is like tasked with this, and it's like that is their reason for living, is to collect these gems and combine them to save the human world. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the 4 Warriors of Light, if I'm being honest. There's some similarity. There's some like similar to that. The basic idea about the party being summoned by the gods to save the humans is not it's not a new one. So I mean, even though the story was radically changed, you can't tell Gary had some influence in this, because a lot of it does because even the Super NES version of the story was almost 90% changed. Right. There's still some D&D vestige still lingering around. Oh yeah, for sure. One of the things I liked about this game is that there is an ability to essentially create your party. And I mean that as in, yes, you're restricted to like your soldier class, your priestess, whatever.
Yeah, I was going to mention that later on. You can play the default party, or you can also make your own party members if you want to.
Yes. So, and I saw that as like, that's where you can set your difficulty, because, you can assess the points for your character. So if you have a warrior, which of course you have a warrior because you can't really change the party. But anyways, so for your warrior, you make their strength, way up there. You're going to have an easier time, in battles with him. Whereas with your priestess or whatever, you can have the intelligence raised up, and then they're easier to cast magic and, obviously, again, affecting battles and make it easier. So you can kind of start the game off however you would like. That being said, you all should know me by now. I made this as easy as possible for me. I still had issues.
Right. So let me also just say that real quick. I do appreciate the fact not only does the game give you give you a brief tutorial on how to play to start the game if you want to. The game does give you at least a hint as what to do to start off with. It basically says they go to this castle, talk to this guy. That guy will then say, okay, go over to this castle and talk to this guy, and so on and so on. So the game does at least give you breadcrumbs to follow on. That said, like Joe said, you do have the freedom to basically just do whatever you want to do.
Yes, and that is where I think the crux of this game absolutely is, because yes, you do have a map, which is nice. But honestly, like, that map was gibberish to me. I couldn't figure out what direction I was going in, anything, because I'm used to looking at a map, kind of seeing the landmarks and being able to navigate by those landmarks. And, man, 1, this is 1991. 2, this is an early, like, 3D polygon game. So there's a lot of pop-in, and it's not just for the things you're looking for, like the first castle, but also you have your random battles that will pop up, and much like many early RPGs, the random encounter is pretty high. I don't think it was egregious compared to other Super NES games, like Lufia comes to mind, but it was still, like, every 4 or 5 steps, I was kind of hitting a random encounter, which is still, Anyways, automatic attacking is nice. I will admit that. So I didn't have to sit there and fumble through menus every single time I wanted to attack. You just kind of, set them all to attack, and they go do their thing automatically, which is great. And it looks like a gang fight. They literally all just hoard the enemy and just start swinging away. It's great. Yeah. So how do I put this without sounding really bad? So you can easily get lost and wander into areas that won't only just kill your party, like water. There are parts where you have to cross these very narrow straits to get across, like the quote-unquote swamps. It just looks like a lake, but it's the swamps. So, D&D, use your imagination. It felt like encounters ramped up on these tiny little pieces of land that your party can barely fit on. So when a encounter happens, your party spreads out so that you can see them in front of you. If you are on one of these straits, that's maybe the length of one character, your other character is going to end up in that swamp, and they're going to drown. So then you're quickly fumbling with the controller to get over to where you can control that character, pull them out of the water. The controller, they did a good job making this all work with the controller. I really can't knock it for that. What I can knock it for is why they didn't future-proof this with, like, SNES mouse support. Like, I get it. SNES mouse was not a thing yet. Totally understand. But that's what this game needed. Desperately. More than anything else.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. The controllers are clunky. They're clunky, but I mean, like, you do get used to it eventually. But yeah, they're clunky. And like I said, the game definitely shows its computer roots the whole way through, because it's like that's just that's just like how it is. So, but
yeah. So the first run through I did, I got to the first castle. You got to cross the moat to get into the castle. When you get to the castle, your characters spread out like they're going to battle to walk into the castle. Well, one of my characters was over into the moat and ended up dying because I didn't realize that he was in the water. So
yeah, you can't get them out in time quickly by pushing the L or the R button. If you see that happen, right when it happens, but you got to be quick because you only have a couple seconds to do it.
That part was like really the most frustrating thing for me in this game. Once you're in the castle, you get your vague instructions of where to go. There's 4 different sections that you have to go, and they're conveniently lined up horizontally or vertically, whatever that is, up and down, people. It's up and down into 4 basic areas, and coincidentally and conveniently, the map is shaped like a square. So
yes,
there are parameters where if you can understand the map, which I could not, but if you can understand the map, you can prevent yourself from wandering into places you shouldn't be, which can happen very easily. I at one point just kept wandering after I left the castle, kind of trying to find my way, and I somehow wandered into one of the other areas and immediately was met with a, I can't even remember what kind of monster it was, but it was a big monster that took up a pretty good size of the screen, especially compared to my characters, and he just party wiped me, because I was fighting everything. So, why would I run? Little did I know. I think that, when you're in the castles, that whole side view that they give you is kind of nice. I think the visuals in those castles are nice. It's kind of like a 2D, but like kind of like 2.5D before that was a thing. Like it still has that 3D perspective to it, which is nice. And that's probably one of the things I should really champion here is the visuals are just really well done when they're done well. So when you're on, so like I said, 1991. Yes, this is a 3D environment that pops into existence, and it's not pretty, but that's looking through modern eyes. If you're looking through the eyes of someone in 1991, this game is a wonder to behold. Because
and it was.
Right.
That's the reason it's sold so well, because the graphics is like super impressive. Yeah. So
right, like it's crazy. So, unfortunately, me coming to this game 30 years too late, I cannot appreciate. I mean, I can because I play a lot of retro games, but for the most part, I can't appreciate fully what this game did for its time. That also being said, like when you change armor and equipment, it actually changes the appearance of your characters, which fantastic. I love when that happens in a game. That's one of the things I've always complained about with the earlier Final Fantasy games is like
makes for nice visual aid too. Tell you real quick. Okay, he's got that sword. He's got that shield, whatever. So yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you fully.
And I don't know if this was one of the first games to really do it, but at least for the Super Nintendo, probably because it was an early game. But I really like that you actually have a day-night cycle. That was something I was not expecting to experience. So that was pretty cool.
I think some of the Ultimate games had already done this by that point.
Okay.
At least in Japan, Dragon Quest III had come out by 1989, I want to say, which also has a day and night cycle. So
yeah.
Computer game, I think you're probably right as being one of the few. No, first ones. No, I agree with you. Definitely, day and night cycle is nice. As a matter of fact, at least one puzzle the game requires figuring out the day and night cycles to be able to solve it. And you also can get. I'm not sure if this happened to you, Joe, but if you have the bad luck to face a certain constellation at night, the constellation actually comes down to attack you it looks like a monster, which is like really meta as all get out.
Yeah,
but that actually happens too. So that's pretty tough enemy, but but it's pretty cool. It happens.
Yeah. So I thought it was kind of funny that you had mentioned before I started talking about this, about the whole Skyrim open world Fallout thing, because one of the big notes that I put to basically sum this game up was it reminded me of everything I hate about Skyrim. There's very little direction. There's rarely a decent grasp of what is going on. And, and I think that's a big problem with a lot of, story-driven games. I just never cared about the mission. I never cared about the characters or the world I was supposedly trying to save. And I feel like maybe in the PC version, they might have done a little bit better with that. Maybe. I didn't play that version. It sounds like it might have been better.
You actually can play it if you want to. 5 years ago, they added the DOS version of the game to Steam. It's by Steam and GOG.
Okay. So that might be something at some point that I'll definitely have to check out. But yeah, this is, unfortunately, most of the time, this is one of those game genres that's hit or miss for me. It's either I'm going to get connected with the characters and I'm going to enjoy it, or it's a Skyrim experience where I just go around killing everybody because I'm bored and really have no idea what I'm doing. But I paid $60 for the game, so I got to do something. I
should also say there is one thing. Speaking about like direction, like it being lost. I'm not sure if you noticed this, Joe, but if you hit pause, and this was added to the Super Nintendo version of the game. If you hit pause, the game just tell you what direction you're facing.
Oh, no, I did not realize that.
Okay.
So, yeah, there you go.
I mean, the game doesn't do a great job in advertising that fact either in its defense. So, I get it. But
like I said, there was no way. I was going to attempt to at least try to beat this because I did see that, gameplay finishes were around 4 hours. So I was like, I can do this. But the more I got lost and the more I just kept dying because of random encounters that I shouldn't have been encountering, because I went too far before my level, it eventually just got frustrating to me, and I was just like,
It's not just you, however, it's also the fact that those random encounters are not balanced.
Right.
Literally, this happened to me a lot back as a kid, and also playing this again now. They may not be the same creature, but they look like the same creature, because you can run into a creature and crush the floor with it, and then 5 minutes later run into what you think is the same creature, and it defeats you totally instead. It's like, I don't know if it's supposed to be different creatures, and the game doesn't do a great job of communicating the fact that they are different, or if there's just something like random factor the game randomly applies whenever you run into an encounter that determines how strong it is. I'm not sure which of those is the case, but it's not very fair.
Yeah, I was going to say this also falls into the thing that frustrated probably the most about this game is that experience in Jade, which is the currency in the game, is super random just as much as those fights. So you would tackle a big monster. Now, if you're going to tackle a big monster in Final Fantasy, you're going to get a good amount of experience, and you may or may not get a decent amount of gil. Gil's always kind of random, but experience is guaranteed. So you know what to farm, level your guys up, all that. Here, I fought the same monster, I don't know how many times, and the experience gained varied every single time. There was no consistency. And same with getting Jade, which, that is what it is.
There's not really a town per se in this game.
Right.
We should probably mention that. There are ankas, with churches basically, which you can go to heal up, revive characters and also get information, which is very handy. Mm-hmm. There are taverns you can go to also rest up. There are merchants you can encounter you could buy weapons and armor from. But there is no city per se to go into. It's all pretty much just wild landscape with a building scattered randomly here and there for no reason.
Yeah, they really want you to collect those gems and focus solely on that. And get to the 4 different castles. That's really what it is.
Another thing about combat also that's very frustrating is the fact that you can get powerful enemies can flag into your equipment, which is if you just spend a lot of money to buy something and then lose it the next battle, that's not very fair either, because it's damage, okay, yes, games do that, but just destroy totally? It's a lot. There's a lot of what I call artificial difficulty that this game has that you found more of in games of this time period than you would now, because games are more expensive. There weren't as many games out. There were games on the market. People didn't have as many game options available to you. They wanted the games to be more challenging. They want you to play them for longer. So this kind of BS stuff happens stuff like that. But and the interface also, those icons, because there's no confirmation prompts, it's entirely too easy. Hit the wrong button to teleport from a castle right before you reach a boss fight. Yeah, which been there, done that. Believe me. So, like I said, it definitely is. Creaky is the best way I can describe it. The game, the game even back then was kind of creaky. I mean, we knew it was creaky because it's because they ported the game from the computer the best they could. Yes, the game did suffer some advantages being ported to Super NES. It also suffered disadvantages. Another disadvantage that I haven't talked about yet is that a lot of the story and the text and the clues that the game gives you can be a bit hard to follow, because the game's kind of suffered a telephone effect with translation. Yeah. Because the game went from French in its original computer version to English for the DOS version to Japanese the Super Famicom version, back to English again the Super NES version. So with all that being done, words, languages, ideas got twisted around and garbled. So like sometimes the clues you're given don't always make the best sense because of that. Like there's a poem from to give one example, there's a poem from like Emily Dickinson that's important to figure out a puzzle, but good luck figuring out that poem from the French to English to Japanese to English translation that the game goes through. So a guide is definitely recommended for this game for Flagrant and Tackle It.
Yeah.
Like Nintendo Power was a great help for this game back in the day for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, we're going to progress into this pretty soon anyway, so I'm just going to jump out with it now. Mm-hmm. The music that has been added to this game is chef's kiss. So
yeah,
I think
songs.
It's definitely one of the highlights of the game. The music is eerie and atmospheric. When you battle the bosses, you get a little bit of music which is almost like themed, which also kind of hinders itself because they're kind of short pieces, so they do repeat while you're in battle, but not horrible. I think the biggest knock I would give it as far as music and sound effects go would just be the fact that in your normal everyday battles, which is what you're going to be doing most of the time, it's just silent. You just hear the clanging of swords. And I kind of wish like the music would carry over into those battles as well. But it's not horrible. Like that's such a nitpick. Out of everything else that I could complain about with this game, that's definitely one that you should not harp it on for sure. But I wanted to bring that up because I think the music is really good. It's very atmospheric, and this is very much hey, it's 1991. This is a visually and fantastically sounding game, and that's kind of the highlights we are here. It's like, hey, you used to have
to have an open world 3D,
to
have an open world 3D game running on Super NES in 1991 was very impressive. So, which is one of the reasons the game sold very well. But
I mean, they could have put on the advertisement, hey, this was a computer hit 6 months ago or a year ago. Now it's on your Super NES. That would have been enough. Most people would have jumped on that because computers were all the rave. Doom got so popular, one, because it was a computer game and computers were like the new hot thing, and two, because of the shareware. So it's like, this is the same thing. Like if you would have just, literally put, this was a PC game, it would have sold. So I completely understand why at the time, it did sell as well as it did.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. For sure. So,
though I do have to say, if I went from Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy on the NES, because let's be fair, those are going to be the ones that I would play, then suddenly I hear about this as an RPG and I pick this up, I would be very disappointed.
But like I said at the beginning, it's a very different game for anything that had really been released at that point.
Right.
So, I mean, nowadays we have lots of games like this, but back in 1991, this is like pretty groundbreaking. So, there's also I'll mention this part right now too. There's also a final area in the middle of the map with a flashing barrier around it, which you're not really supposed to enter that until toward the end of the game, but you are able to turn around and walk backwards to get stopped by the dragon. The dragon, but because you're walking back, the game will boost you backwards instead, so you actually end up that area way where you're supposed to. So, now whether or not you want to do that, I'll leave up to the player. But it is possible to be able to force your way into that wave where you're supposed to be there. So, anyway. So playing this game again after all these years was definitely interesting. I really enjoyed this game back when it first came out. I thought it was, I was very impressed by the graphics. I thought the game was very unique. It was definitely a challenge, a little bit too hard. I thought in some places I definitely was saving every fight. Fight save in case something happened. But as I said, the bad luck of losing equipment or running into a monster who's you're supposed to be able to beat, but turns out to be much stronger. The game's definitely unfair to you in that sense. That said, I really enjoyed it as a kid. Now, I still appreciate this game for what it is. Like I said before, the game is creaky. It definitely is old. It definitely is rough around the edges. It definitely takes some patience and patience like I'm used to. Anybody who enjoys 3D open world games, however, I think I still advise you to give the game a shot. It's very it's creaky, it's old, it's eccentric, it's weird. But there's still a good game here at the core of it. I still feel that way even today. If you enjoy this kind of game, if you're willing to give it the patience and the time the game requires to overlook its warts and just kind of experience the beauty of what the game actually is, the core gameplay is still solid all these years later. So I still think this game holds up pretty well today if you're willing to with the warnings that you have to be a player who enjoys this kind of game, etc., etc., etc. But yeah, so it definitely is nowhere near as nice of a game now as it was 30 years ago, obviously. But I think the game, but I think the game still, issues and all, is still, can still be a fun game to play today.
Yeah, I mean, in closing, what I literally put in my notes was, if you grew up with this, or you experienced this game when it was new, I completely understand why you might like this game. Completely. Absolutely. But ultimately, I obviously did not enjoy this game. And like I harpened back to the fact that it would have probably been a better experience, at least slightly, with the SNES mouse. But again, I understand that wasn't a thing at the time. And I actually recommend checking out the actual PC game. Just go for the original at this point in 2025, or use Game Genie. If you guys can't die, you can avoid a lot of the heartache that happens in this game for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So and like I said, this version of the game has not been released. Has not been actually. Let me take that back. I think maybe. So I have on here the game. So I have on here the game did come out the Evercade. It doesn't say, however, which version of the game was released for that.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they're talking about the computer version, or the Super NES version. So I don't think the game's been re-released. Mine is possibly being on the Evercade. The computer version of the game, however, lies on Steam, and GOG. So you definitely have that version as well, as well that you can check out. But so the game says right in the ending screen, continued in Drakkhen 2. So they are anticipating making a sequel way back when the original version of the game first came out. So it took several years, and several years they got renamed. But the sequel did finally come out, Drakkhen 2 in Japan, and we know it here in North America as Dragon View. So we will be covering the sequel to this game later on this year in a future podcast.
I also just wanted to update. The Evercade version is this version.
Okay, yeah. So the Super NES version has been re-released then on the Evercade. So, all right, so that's cool. So yeah, so both versions of the game are definitely available to be able to play today, if you want to play them. So, that's good. But, the reviews of this game are, you probably got the sense from how Joe and I talking about it, just how divided opinion that we are on it. We're not alone. This game may have the most diverse opinions on it for any Super NES game we've covered so far in the history of the podcast. There's a wide range of views on this game. It can range. I've seen reviews of this game ranging from it sucks, worst thing on the console period, it's horrible, don't play it, to this is a great game that's been overlooked, warts and all, and you really need to experience this game. It's better than it looks. Everything else in between, and it's not contemporary views. People had this opinion way back in 1981 as well too. So all through the game's life, it's either been loved or hated, or somewhere like in the middle. So, like I said, there's a huge disparity of opinion on this game. Just to give you a few minor examples, Games International back in the day gave this 9 out of 10. Drakkhen, which is a very famous D&D fantasy magazine, gave 4 out of 5 out of 5. Computer Video Game Magazine gave 83 out of 100. Nintendo Power gave 3.1 out of 5 stars. White Wolf, which is also like a very famous magazine, gave like 4 out of 5. Those are all pretty good reviews. More recently, Super Gamer gave it 84%. I think it's one line from Wikipedia kind of sums up. It also sums up pretty well when they say that respective reception of the Super NES version has been very mixed, with many YouTubers and bloggers calling it confusing and unplayable by modern standards. While this find it appealing for its experimental nature, openness to interpretation, unintentionally cryptic story, and its intense absurdities. So it all comes down to what you enjoy in a game, what you're looking for, basically.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, the video reviews, the written reviews, they're all divided. They're all really spread across the board. As I said, I've not seen a game range as wildly in opinion as I have like this game. So, for good reason. Like I said, the core of the game is still intact, but what we expect out of the game 35 years has changed, and the actual what was great back then is no longer anywhere. Like, it's no longer near as good as it is now. So It's like, I get it. It all depends what you're looking for in a game. Looking for a game, and how much patience and tolerance you have for stuff of this nature, and a thousand other factors that go into it. So this is not in closing. This is not a pick up and play game. You do have to read the manual. You do have to probably look at a guide probably for help. You definitely have to give this game some time. But I think if you give the game the time that it deserves, and you enjoy games and you enjoy open world games of this type, there definitely still is like a solid game here to play for sure. I feel like, at least anyway. So, just a very, very interesting game. Very ahead of its time in many ways, and kind of fun to go back to and take a look at it again. So, and you would be pleased to know, I think, however, Joe, that Drakkhen used a very different game. They went for more of, they went for more of an action role playing Zelda /E style with that game instead. So, hopefully, that'll be more of a rally. But anyway. Because the game sold well, it's a very cheap game to get on eBay. Probably one of the cheapest Super NES games I've seen. Actually, I've seen both CART and CIB. Probably because it did sell so many copies back in the day. There were 142 copies of this game that were currently on eBay at the time of doing research. 47 copies of the game had recently sold. These prices include shipping for North American copies only. Yeah, like I said, very cheap game. You can pick up a card this game for only between $10 to $20. And CIB copy this game is only $21 to $59. A sealed copy of the game, a graded slabbed copy, did sell recently for $900, which seems expensive. But they realize probably not many sealed copies of this game exist, and B, it's sealed and graded. So it's graded and ranked. So there you go. Whenever water or whatever it gets involved, it's always going to crank the prices up by a significant degree as well too. So you do have that as well also. But yeah, very very cheap, affordable game to get for your collection today if you want it. And I actually do not know how much. Let me. Why don't you go ahead and do any final closing thoughts that you may have, Joe? Let me look up this game real quick.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a good game for what it is and for the time period. Highlights are obviously the music and the visuals. And visuals, I mean, impressive for 1991. I don't want someone, going directly from this podcast, firing that game up and being like, "Oh my God, what's that triangle tree?"
Yeah.
But yeah, for the time period, that's the thing. A lot of the times that we, play these games, I try to put myself back in that time period. So like, I would have been, almost 10 years old when this game came out. I hadn't, developed the love for RPGs. Like, this would have been one of those rentals where I would have been like, oh, cool, a dragon on the cover, and then got home and complained about it for the next, 2 days, because my parents were most certainly not taking me back to Blockbuster to return it and get something else. I was stuck with it until, they returned it Sunday night. So, yeah, it's just, you got to keep that 1991 mindset in your head.
For sure. Yep.
When you're going after it.
So both Drakkhen and Drakkhen View are available for sale on Steam still. You can get the games for $8 a pop for each game, or you buy them together for $12.78.
Oh, well, it's not bad at all.
No, mind you, keep in mind that's the original computer versions of both games. The Super NES version of both games have improvements that you're not going to find the original PC version of the game. So keep that in mind. But having said that, yeah, the price is pretty good.
Yeah.
So anyway, like I said, we will be covering Drakkhen View later on, which also originally came out as a computer game. And then they got ported to Super NES. So,
yeah, it's about a month's time.
So. Yeah, and again, I played that, and again, that's another game I played back in the day. So that's also going to be another game that I'm going to be going back again to look at it again after a long time. But
another game from Greg's childhood, I'm going to ruin.
Well, like I said, it's action RPG, so hopefully that alone, and the fact it's 3 years later, in 1994, should make the game more appetizing to you at least.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, we'll find out. So. Anyway, as always, we appreciate you giving us a few minutes of your day. Any feedback, comments, questions, etc. can be left either on our Facebook page, or you can also send me an email to the SNESpodcast@yahoo.com. Joe, how can I reach you?
You can find me on Twitter at JOESUX30. I also have a very public Facebook, not family friendly. I do the Radical Retro Roundup podcast, which can be found on anything you listen to podcasts, including this podcast. And we should be recording a new episode at the end of the month. It sounds like George is done with his move and doing better. So fingers crossed.
I'm glad to hear it.
I haven't had anybody email me and complain that a new episode hasn't come out yet. So I appreciate anyone who does listen to both podcasts for, being patient with me. I did reach out to a couple people to try to record an episode, and it just, scheduling. We have it here with the SNES podcast sometimes with special guests. Like, it's just very hard when you're not set in a schedule to record every week to just set something up with someone randomly. So I just decided, you know what, I'll wait till George is ready. So.
Yep. No, I understand. Makes sense. So, all right, folks. As always, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. Thank you again, like as always, Joe, for joining us.
Of course.
We'll catch you again next time, everybody. Be safe, be well, and later. Take care, all.
Bye.
Nintendo controls 80% of the video market. But no matter how you play the game, or which game you play, things definitely have come a long way since Pac-Man.
Now you're playing with power. Super power.